I put boys head, when will it end? When will people start getting together again? Things are getting better. The news ain't worrying. What else is new, my friend? Besides what I bring, ain't find no work, ain't find no job, my friend. Money is tighter than it's ever been. Hey man, I just don't understand what's going on. Cause this thing, what's happening, brother? Hey, what's happening? I want to know. Things still get down when we used to go with things. I'm on up when I can. You think they have a check? And tell me, friend, how in the world have you been? Tell me what's up. I don't know what's in. Woo! What's the deal? What's the deal, man? What's happening? What's happening, brother? What's happening? What's happening, brother? I wanna know what's happening. What's happening, my man? Been gone a long, long time. Now I'm back on the scene. What's happening, brother? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening, brother? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening?
All right. Good evening and welcome to another edition of Conversations with Conrad. I'm your host, Reverend Conrad Tillard. And as always, we come to you on this program, and we have been off for a while, and we are back now, and we're going to be back in the form of a podcast that we're going to do 2 times a week, and you'll be able to listen and hear from me and my analysis every Sunday afternoon and every Tuesday morning. And so we're going to engage this new medium, no longer on terrestrial radio. We're going to engage the podcast format. And we come to you, as always, not from the right, and nor do we come to you from the left, but we are a program that comes straight down the middle, common sense from an African American perspective. And I hope that you will continue to join this station, that you will like, share, subscribe on this YouTube platform so that we can help to expand our reach, to reach people, to give people an alternative view. I think one of the problems today is that people too often have very few perspectives that are different from the mainstream or corporate media or what is the standard sort of observation or observations of the day. And people need a different perspective. And so I hope that you will continue to tune in. If you're listening now, please like. If you listen to this program later, I would urge you to like and help me to share this program. Tonight, we're going to do our part 2 of the 2024 election postmortem. I was on Tuesday immediately after the election, and I got a chance to share some of my observations, and I wanted to do that because I knew a lot of folks were hurting. I knew a lot of folks were eager to kind of understand what happened. And I know, because I live in New York, I know that many people in the New York metropolitan area just thought it was a fait accompli. that Trump would lose and that Kamala Harris would be president. And, this is also a result of listening to all liberal and progressive sources. And we're going to talk about that later today. But let me just first, because many of you may not know me, and some of you may have never listened to Conversations with Conrad before. And so I want to share a little bit because I am very sensitive today to the feelings of young people, Black women in particular, that desired that Kamala Harris would be the first woman elected president. We've been down this road before. Hillary Clinton lost to Trump in 2016. And then, of course, everyone thought that Kamala Harris would win the election on Tuesday, and that she would not only be the first woman, but the first woman of color. And I want to say to Black women, first and foremost, and I've been saying this all week, take heart, be of good cheer, be optimistic and hopeful. I've taken folks to task all week, and I want you to hear what I'm saying about this. I think we should get away from saying racism and sexism is why Kamala Harris didn't win. I think that's a great mistake. I think that's a mistake for several reasons. I think it's a mistake because it places the burden, it places the onerous of this a loss on her when it was not her loss. If you will remember, she has only been in this race 3.5 months. If you will remember, Joe Biden, the president of the last 3.5 years, had a disastrous debate performance against Donald J. Trump. And as a result, the party went into a panic, and it was decided that Biden had to go. And so, obviously, 3.5 months before a national election, a party is dumbfounded as to what to do. And so when some of the big money folks said that, hey, Biden's out, I'm not supporting this party if Biden's the standard bearer. So they start wringing their hands and trying to figure out what they were going to do. The first idea that came up was that there would be a convention of sort, and that there would be some sort of process to give people an opportunity to become a part of the competition for to become the standard bearer. And of course, many people were thinking people like Gavin Newsom, but of course, the Democrats were in a precarious position because after saying for the last 4 years that Black women were the most loyal constituency, and their voting numbers certainly bear that out. I'm going to get on the point today that the Democrats forgot that while Black women were, no question, their most loyal constituency, they completely forgot the second most loyal constituency, and that was Black men, who voted 87% for Joe Biden in 2020. And so they knew they couldn't go against Kamala Harris, who was the sitting vice president. Had they selected Gavin Newsom over Kamala Harris, it would have been a brawl. It would have been a war, and Black women would have bolted the party. And so I will agree with them that it was common sense to support the vice president. And of course, Kamala Harris jumped in and said, hey, I'll do it. Here am I, send me. Here's the problem. The problem was Joe Biden was already heading toward an ignominious defeat. Here's the other problem. The brand was already damaged. The American people had already predicted, already forecasted. Everyone that had an ounce of common sense, everyone that was observing, they knew that the mood in the country was not one of satisfaction or approval of the current administration. And so Kamala Harris jumped in and she began to run, and she did create a lot of enthusiasm in the party. And that's why I'm saying to women, stop saying it's racism and sexism. That's why she lost. Because what you're doing is diminishing her accomplishment. And her accomplishment was great. She raised more money than anyone in the history of American politics in just 3 months. She got 626 electoral college votes, and some 60 plus million people voted for her. That's an achievement. You know, to her great credit, and I'll give Barack Obama some credit on this. See, they understand what the average brother and sister out here does not understand is that when you're playing that high, when you're playing at that level, you couldn't get there unless you had a lot of white support. And if you don't get all of it, you can't turn around and say, you see, it's because I was Black, you didn't support me. That's not intelligent, nor is it true, because a lot of white people voted for her. A lot of men voted for her. Okay. And so, there are a lot of men in this country. I mean, in the overwhelming majority of men, probably only 47 and Hillary Clinton can ever say they've raised that much money to run for a political office. Probably only those 47 men, or 46, because Trump's going to be elected for the second time, can ever say they got electoral votes, or that 50 or 60 or 80 million people voted for them. And so you can't say that racism and sexism was not behind Kamala Harris. Otherwise, she wouldn't have reached where she reached. She didn't win. She didn't get over the hump. Trump got more, but there are other reasons to explain that. And I'm saying I'm not diminishing your frustration. I'm not diminishing your pain. But what I'm saying is, if you diminish her great achievements by simply saying racism and sexism prevented her from winning, you're doing her a disservice, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing progress a disservice. I tell my students at CCNY every semester, I teach on the civil rights movement. I teach on the Black Power movement. I teach on Harlem. I teach on Malcolm X. I teach on hip hop. But when they come into my civil rights class and I question them early on, they love to talk about how America hasn't changed. Nothing's changed. Everything's still the same. And when they come in my class like that, I make sure over the course of the semester that they truly understand that America has changed. See, they learn about Money, Mississippi. They learn about Chief Lowry Pritchett. They learn about Sheriff Jim Clark. They learn about literacy tests and poll tax. They learn about Fannie Lou Hamer. They learn about Jimmy Lee Jackson and Viola Luiso. They learn about Dr. King, and they learn about Rosa Parks and the struggle, and they can never say after learning that America hasn't changed. And that's why this year on election day, I gave them the day off. And I said, you go out and vote. You've learned what it means for the KKK and the White Citizens Council and other entities to try to intimidate and threaten Blacks into not voting. You don't have that in New York City. You don't have any impediment to voting. Get up and go vote. And I'm saying to women today, you've made a great deal of progress. And Sister Harris did a great job, but the loss wasn't hers. She was only the candidate for 3.5 months. Don't you bear that loss. Don't you allow that narrative to be written that she failed, because that's what the pundits will do. If you say she wasn't elected because she was a black woman, you let Biden off the hook. And my important thesis is that you let the Democratic Party off the hook. Now, I know a lot about this. I started in politics in 1984. My first political campaign, my first interest in politics was when Reverend Jesse L. Jackson ran for president the first time in 1984. I became the Pennsylvania State Student Coordinator, and I worked in the national office. And when Reverend Jackson spoke in San Francisco and gave his tremendous speech at the Democratic Convention, the speech deemed as one of the 100 greatest political speeches in the history of America, I was devastated. I was devastated. I was hurt, and I did not participate in the political process for a long time. Now, uh, racism was real in 1984, and America was not ready for an African American president. And I loved Reverend Jackson. In fact, in 1988, the 88 campaign of Reverend Jesse Jackson started in Cleveland, Ohio, in a meeting with three people. The principal, of course, Reverend Jackson, was there. We were at Cleveland State University. And Ron Daniels, Dr. Ron Daniels, who would become his campaign manager, and myself. And I was offered the position of the National Youth and Student Coordinator. At the time, I was in the Nation of Islam, and there were differences between Reverend Jackson and Minister Farrakhan at the time. And I was just coming into the nation. I was in for several years, but I decided that my loyalty was with Minister Farrakhan at the time. And I didn't decide to go with Reverend Jackson's campaign that year. And shortly, I would be nominated and appointed to be the National Youth and Student Minister in the Nation of Islam. Then I'd go on to be Minister of Mosque number 7 in Harlem. And then after many years in the nation, I returned to the church. And I was licensed and ordained by Dr. Calvin Butts at the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. I pastored 4 Black churches. I've worked at Black radio stations. I mean, my career has been working with Black people. And so I know Black people. I understand the nuances. I grew up in the Black community. So what I'm saying to you, sisters, is that I know the pain. I know the hurt. But I did watch that several 30 plus years later, Barack Obama did become the first Black president, and America will have a woman president. There's no question about that. The country is ready, in my view. If India is ready, why wouldn't America be? If Pakistan is ready, why wouldn't America be? There are many countries in the world that have elected a woman as the head of state, and America will break that glass ceiling eventually. But this instance, in my view, was about a very flawed party message, and let's talk about that for a minute. You know, this flawed message. You know, one of the things that, as I listen to all of the folks who are doing postmortems and looking at the what happened, you know, what happened in the election? How did things end up so badly? Well, let's look at this. All right, let's try to understand what happened. The first thing we have to understand is that the problem with the Democrat Party is not what many of these so-called professionals are saying. It's not an issue of messaging. It's an issue of the message. The message that the Democratic Party has been developing and honing the last 20 years after the presidency of Bill Clinton, with the election of Barack Obama, it's been a shift toward the left. Obama moved the party greatly toward the left, to an era of progressivism, and that has increasingly made the Democratic Party out of step with the majority of Americans, okay? It certainly made the Democratic Party out of step with Americans throughout the country, outside of the two coasts. And of course, we didn't see it in the Obama era because Barack Obama was much loved. He was the first Black president. And many people, myself included, looked past many of the policies. Of course, he did not always represent his true views to us, but as Black folks, we were just so proud to see a Black president that it really didn't matter what his policies were. And you will have to forgive us for that. Those that say, well, you shouldn't vote based on race. I agree with that. I agree with that now. I do. But you couldn't have told me that in 2008 because we had never gotten to the point where a Black person was so close to being elected. And as I said, I started with Reverend Jackson. I shed tears, and I certainly understood why he shed tears that night in Grant Park over the election of Obama, because he had paid the price. He had been rejected, and to see this young man reach the pinnacle, I'm sure made him feel exponentially more proud than I felt. All right, but the fact remains that Obama moved the party to the left, and my view is this is what's happening with the Democratic Party. The Democrats are becoming increasingly left of center because they have increasingly become more and more connected to the academy. All right. The Democrats are becoming eggheads. All right. The people who are the spokespersons, the people who are largely identified by the American people as people advocating for the Democratic Party are the people they see on television. And the people they see on television, whether it's MSNBC or CNN, which are the two prominent stations, and quite frankly, these are the two stations where too many Blacks get their news from. I'm telling you right now, if you're sitting up under MSNBC all day, it's playing 24 hours a day, you're being brainwashed and you are being made to have a view that has no relationship to what most people in this country think. And you have to understand that. This is just a fact. I was listening to my good friend, Professor Eddie Glaude, and I've known Eddie Glaude for 40 years. I respect Eddie Glaude, but I'm going to play something that Professor Glaude said recently, and I want to just show you why I feel that this is absolutely outside of the mainstream of the thinking of the average African American and really the average person in America. Let's go to the screen share. This is Eddie Glaude on MSNBC this week. All right, let's go to okay, here we go. Now let's take a listen to this.
Eddie, the fact that we were all so
It looks like I'm going to have a
blindsided by the election results, does that tell us that identity politics is silencing people? Because even I can see in my social media feed in the last couple of days, all these people are suddenly like, yeah, that was my guy. We're hearing stories in the suburbs the day after the election. People are now putting Trump signs up.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, but let's be clear, Trumpism is a form of identity politics.
Amen.
We don't want to say that this, my beautiful white skin, remember? That's what he said.
Yes.
Tucker Carlson saying in Madison Square Garden, we have been given permission to call BS on this wokeism stuff. We will no longer be made to feel guilty. That comes straight out of we will not be replaced. That came straight out of Tucker.
There were a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump who didn't listen to the rally and who don't know who Tucker Carlson is, but who are super unhappy about inflation, that they can't afford their lives, and they voted for him, and they're not buying into fascism.
I get that, but I think they have an idea, though, that whenever the incoherence of the country comes into full view, the tricky magic of falling into place, falling behind an ocean of whiteness that can hold off all the reason why all hell is breaking loose economically, right, is because big government is putting its thumb on the scale and redistributing resources from deserving people to undeserving people, right? So there's this sense, right, that whiteness, right, is under threat. The demographic shifts. The country isn't. All of these racially ambiguous children on Cheerios commercials are confusing the hell out of me.
Eddie, a lot of people voted because their life's too damn expensive, and it was here, and
they voted for. You're telling me, Stefan, that all of these people who believe that their lives are, that bread is too high and eggs are too high, that they voted for a convicted fella, a guy who said we can grab the pea.
I think that a lot.
They voted for this
listen,
guy.
I'm not defending it, but I think there are tons of people that don't pay attention to, and I'm not defending it, don't pay attention to politics at all. But while we live in the most prosperous country in the world, people are saying life's not fair. I'm not doing well. My son's still living in the basement. I can't seem to get a job. I don't like the status quo. I'm voting for something else. And
I love you to life.
I love you,
but I do not believe that. I cannot believe that. And the reason I think you believe it is because you don't want to believe that that's what's really motivating them. It's always the case. People don't want to believe what the country actually is, because if they believe it, they're going to have to confront what's in them. I don't believe that. They voted for a crook, a person who they know is stealing from, just doing everything to undermine the so-called country that they love. And then they're telling us the BS that it's economics. We know that's not true. We know it's not true. And we got to raise our kids in this. Oops.
You're allowed.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to stop there because let me make sure I've stopped my screen share. Okay, great. All right. I hope you heard that. You know, I have the greatest respect for Dr. Eddie Glaude. He's a great man. He's an academic in his field. He's one of the great scholars. But see, that's the problem with the Democratic Party, because the people speaking for the Democratic Party, or the people who are advising them, or who they are thinking, who they are engaging in terms of trying to put forth a platform, are people like Dr. Glaude. And if you just heard that, he went on a rant about how basically the election outcome is about white racism. We will not be replaced. And that presupposes a number of things. That presupposes, first of all, that only white people voted for Trump. And everything we know from the election results is that the Trump coalition was broad and diverse, 45% of Latinos, 20% of Blacks. And so you can't make the observation, and we've got to get out of this reflexive, sort of narrow, almost childish, reflexive desire to say everything is race. So Eddie Glaude, you're wrong. It's not race. And let me say this as well. You know, you are an educator, and that's the problem. You teach at Princeton. You live in that area. Princeton is a wonderful area. It's like many of our fine areas, particularly on the Eastern Seaboard. It's affluent. It's highly educated. It has a lot of industry that's geared toward very well-educated people. People are paid very well for the most part, although there's always been a Black community in Princeton, and Central New Jersey itself is not necessarily as affluent as that immediate area. That's your world. You know, what do you know about what people in the everyday American landscape are thinking? What do you know about people in Pittsburgh? What do you know about people in East St. Louis? What do you know about people in Romulus, Michigan, and different cities across the country? And I know you'll say this. You'll say, well, I'm from Moss Point, Mississippi, and I know you rose up from Moss Point, Mississippi, and that's great. But when's the last time you lived there? And my point is, those of you that occupy these academic spaces, those of you that occupy these elite journalistic spaces, everybody on that panel is highly paid. Everybody on that panel has moved to a certain level of life that they are no longer connected with people in the community, everyday people. And I'm not even talking about poor people. When I listen to Morning Joe and I sit there and listen to Mika talk about eggs for $7 that she buys at Whole Foods, most people don't even have a Whole Foods anywhere near them. When they talk about and they reflect upon the things that they reflect upon, it is essentially high culture from top to bottom, which demonstrates that they don't know what the average person is thinking. And Eddie Glaude is wrong to say that. I'm sure there are some voters that voted for Trump that are racist, but what measurement, what yardstick, what tool are you using to make that very subjective statement? And why are you so unwilling to hear the voters? See, that's what academics do. They are so invested in their theories, particularly if they're light sciences. The theories really can't be proven, but their name is on the research. They've authored the theory, and so they argue it. And that's what they do in the academy. They argue ideas. Their byproduct is ideas. But that doesn't work in the real world. Yes, I'm telling you, Eddie Glaude, if you won't listen to Stephanie Rule, and it's really interesting that a Black man that comes from Moss Point, Mississippi, has drank the Kool-Aid so much that you got a white woman having to tell you that the rent is too damn high, the groceries are too damn high, and you still don't believe it. And that's the problem with the Democratic Party. They do not believe what their own lying eyes are telling them. They don't believe what the people have been saying. They don't believe the sticker price at the store. They don't believe the price of gas. And yes, of course, the Biden administration made some corrective steps, but gas was low under Trump. It spiked under Biden because of some energy decisions, just like the border became overrun with immigrants based on some policy decisions. They tried to course correct toward the end of their term when the election had already started, but it was too late. The die was cast. And that's why I'm saying Kamala Harris didn't lose the election. The Democrats lost the election. You know, one of the problems with the Democrats, and this speaks to this over dependence on these academic voices, not enough everyday men. I was listening to Bob Brady, who is the big Democrat down in Philadelphia. Bob Brady's been the head of the Democratic Party for years. Even when I was in Philadelphia, Bob Brady was a player on the scene. And he talked about how the Trump campaign, how the Harris campaign did not engage the common blue-collar Democrats in Philadelphia, the people that had delivered elections for Clinton, for Obama. And I remember when Hillary Clinton ran, it was the same story with people like Robbie Mook. They talked about those people in Brooklyn. And I don't mean Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brownsville, or East New York, but they were smug folks down in Brooklyn Heights. And I'm telling you, when you think about when the Democrats win, It's because of an optimistic message. Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. Barack Obama, yes, we can. And if you would objectively look at the campaigns of both Hillary Clinton and this campaign that Kamala Harris was forced into, they both had a negative appeal. They both warned the people about how dangerous Trump is. They both spent their entire time just focusing on how bad things would be under a guy like Trump. And the American people didn't buy it. They didn't buy it this time because they lived under 4 years of Trump. And they understood that, yeah, January 6th happened, but guess what? Overall, there was no appreciable difference between the administration of Trump and the other presidents they lived under. Plus, they felt the economy was better. And so the Democrats made a great mistake to double down. Every journalist that was in league with the Democratic Party, and you and I must admit that the media was so biased that I think it turned a lot of people off. You know, Americans love an underdog, and even though Trump is a white male and is wealthy and powerful, when Americans see that everywhere you turn, the media, the political class, both Republicans and Democrats are against a man, that often makes Americans look more favorably at that person and stand up for that person. And the media was absolutely biased against Trump. And I think the Democrats, with the academics, the feminists, I think they begin to think that if we just keep doubling down, just keep talking about how bad Trump will be. Sadly, even preachers got into it. But how do you think you're going to win a national election, pardon me, when your main campaign slogan is that Trump is an existential threat to the United States? And see, that's the problem when you become too academic, too eggheadish. Most people don't even know what existential means, okay? And I'll tell you, most people who were struggling and who were paying too much for groceries, they were not thinking about an existential threat. In fact, they were hoping, willing, even to risk voting for Donald Trump again, because the Democrat Party, they reason have really lost touch with the everyday American. And I certainly agree with that. As a Black man, I've been a Democrat my whole life. I've never not been a Democrat. But I feel that the Democratic Party, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. I'm a Democrat today, but I feel like the Democrats have left me. That's why when Barack Obama tried to lecture Black men, he was roundly rejected. I mean, he was roasted on social media. I mean, in very disrespectful ways. He had a certain status among Black people, but when he took that smug position and tried to lecture Black people, we had to remind him, you're not a minister. You are not beloved in the way that some of our great leaders are. You're not Malcolm. You're not Martin King. You're not Marcus Garvey. We love you as a politician, but you don't have the ability to lecture and condemn our excessive behavior because you haven't done enough in our community to do that. And so Black men rejected President Obama. They rejected Whoopi Goldberg. They rejected all of the people that engaged in that conversation. I mean, old and young. I mean, if you talk to Black men that way, you were rejected. And so that was a big mistake. The Democrats have to reassess. They used to be the party of the hard hat. They used to be the party of the middle class and the working class. But increasingly, they are the party of the college educated. And they haven't added to their base and coalition. They're exchanging, if you will, the educated folks for the folks that are moderately well educated or do not have a college degree. And I will tell you this, since there are only about 10% of the American population with a college degree, it's going to be very hard to win political elections, just depending on people like Eddie Glaude and Michael Eric Dyson. You're going to have a hard time. And so the Democrats have made a grave mistake in that regard. The other problem that the Democrats have had as they increasingly begin to rely on these academicians, and as they have allowed the left to take over. You got 4 members of the squad. You got people like Jamal Bowman that were roundly defeated. Mondaire Jones, who's been trying his best to get back in office, moving all over the place to run in districts, and again, rejected. And yet the Democrats have allowed this ultra left wing, this extreme. Listen, the difference between the traditional liberal that was in the Democratic Party and the progressive, the current is a difference as different as night and day. Okay, the progressive today, generally speaking, doesn't like the country, does not believe, doesn't really even understand its political institutions, is not trying to improve the country, but thinks there's a fundamental need to restructure the country. And I'm saying to you, you're not going to win national elections when the people figure out that essentially what you want to do is change the country from a capitalist democratic form of government and a capitalist economic system to a socialist economic and political system. You're not going to win that way. You can be deceptive. You can keep that from the American people, but increasingly the American people are finding out. And so not only do they become extreme on economic issues, you hear people in places like Brooklyn and other places where socialists, I mean, we have people in the New York City Council and the New York State Legislature that brag that they're socialists. And they make no bones about it. They'll tell you, I don't believe in private property. Many of them say they don't believe in the police, abolish the police. Many of them want to get rid of cars. Many of them are pushing for a tax that if you drive from 110th Street down to 34th Street to pick up grandma who's just come in from Penn Station, or 42nd Street, just come in from Port Authority, you got to pay $18 to $25, okay? Because they don't believe that people should be driving cars. They want to make it difficult. They want to tax people into riding the bikes that you see on the streets of Manhattan. And so the Democrats have allowed people like this, locally and nationally, to dominate their party, and they're afraid of them. They're afraid to call them out. And in so doing, the Democrats have lost the ability to have nuanced arguments. I mean, let's look at the immigration issue. Now, you know, America's a country of immigrants. Of course, we know that history. But there has never been a time in America where people just bum rush the border. And that is not a sign of enlightenment. That's not a sign of a great nation, to have people just bum rush your borders. That's a sign of a lack of order. And let me tell you, I've pastored churches with immigrants, okay? People who do it the right way, who spend a great amount of time applying and going through the process of becoming American citizens and working hard to get their relatives into this country. They don't have any particular sympathy for people that are bum rushing the border. So that's a mistake. That's Democrats not having nuance, not using common sense, just believing that our Latino brothers and sisters are going to support us because, after all, we are for people coming in illegally, and more have come in under us than anyone else. And that's why they lost 45% of Latinos. That was about effective strategy as their attempt to foist upon the Latino community and everybody else, mind you, this silly academic term describing Latinos. I think the word is Latinx. The Latin community in America roundly rejected that. That was created in the laboratory of some college campus, and in fact has no practical application in the real world. And too many of the Democrat policies are that way because they don't like people like me. They don't like people like you, people that will push back, people who will say that doesn't make sense, people who will say I'm for immigrants, but we don't need to have our borders overrun with people from all over the world because we're not enforcing our borders and we're taking something very specific in the law, this wonderful, generous thing that we have in America, that for people that are oppressed, people that are either religious minorities, sexual minorities, people whose lives are in danger, we offer them this sort of status of being a refugee, an asylum seeker, and we will give you a sort of immediate relief and letting you come into the country, and your case will be adjudicated later. But that provision in the law, not designed for millions of people. And most of the people that have come into this country are economic refugees. They're coming to America because they want to improve their economic lot in life. And this, I don't blame them for that. They're not bad for that. But the United States does not have unlimited resources and cannot open up its arms and borders to millions of people. Well, and we never did. We always had a reason for opening up our borders for immigrants. And when you have a situation like you have now, where a party can't even get the immigration issue right because there's no nuanced conversation. There's no nuance. If you say what I'm saying now, you're a hater. You're a xenophobe. You don't like immigrants, which of course is ridiculous. And these are all labels designed to stifle dissent, designed to frighten people, to intimidate people. And so people voted with their feet. They said, okay, all right, you'll cancel me if I vote for Trump. I won't be able to get a job. Or you'll harass me online. Some neurotic sitting in his underwear will threaten me and my family. I'll be kicked off of this platform or that platform. But you know what? On election day, I'll have my recompense. And in fact, one of the interesting things about the election results is that there are many people who voted for Trump that just wouldn't feel comfortable saying that because unfortunately it's impolitic, it is politically incorrect, and so millions of people from the entire country just voted for him and didn't say anything because the Democratic Party has become a party of tyrants. And that's what Robert Kennedy was saying. Hey, he's a Democrat. I mean, nobody has greater Democratic bona fides than the Kennedy family. But the party that really is about canceling people, let's be honest, it's the Democratic Party. Okay, Republicans got their faults. But one of their faults is, for the most part, now they got some issues that they will cancel you on, but for the most part, it's the Democrats that have all of these potential landmines that you can step on. You're not supposed to say this. You're not supposed to say that. You have to start out a meeting with pronouns. You have to do this. You have to do that. People are tired of that. And if the Democrats want to listen to the Eddie Glauds, want to listen to the people in these elite universities where this stuff takes place, you're going to lose the man with the hard hat. You're going to lose the customer service worker. You're going to lose the nurse's aide. You're going to lose the school teachers. You're going to lose the people that are in real world conditions. And that's why we got to wake up. Nuance is key when discussing any issue. What about human sexuality? When did we get to the point where if someone expresses a concern that what is called gender affirming surgery on children is wrong? Children are young and impressionable. Children are people whom society has deemed cannot give consent to someone who says who's 35 years old. So, well, that 13-year-old girl, she loved me. She emailed me 100 times and said she wanted to have sex with me. By statute, that young girl cannot consent. And so even if she did those things, that is not a defense for some creep in a courtroom, because by statutorily, he raped her because she's not of age of consent. Well, here's some nuance. If a child can't consent to sexual relations when they're a minor, if a child can't buy a beer or cigarettes, or if a child has to be in the house at a certain time, or if a child can't get an aspirin at school without their parents giving their permission, if a child can't play sports without a parental form, how is it that we as a society can say that it's okay for children to have life-altering surgeries? And I understand there are parents that support this, and I understand. But in the free marketplace of ideas, people have to have the ability to say, hey, I don't agree with that. If we're going to develop a public policy stance on that issue, we have to have nuanced conversations. The Democrats have created a situation where you can't have nuanced conversations. You're labeled, you're considered a hater, you're considered someone that's a homophobe, when that's nothing could be further from the truth. The same thing with this issue of sports. People who say, wait a minute, we have sports for boys and sports for girls, because traditionally we've understood that boys are physically stronger. They perform at a different level of competition, and we've always wanted an apples to apples comparison. We've not wanted to have an apples to orange comparison. So girls have played soccer with other girls. Girls have played volleyball with other girls. Girls have played a softball with other girls. They've swam with other girls. They've run track against other girls. And that's worked out well. And in fact, as a man who has a daughter who played sports, these young ladies thrive through competing against each other. And many of them are blessed to get scholarships and to really grow and become accomplished at their sports. Well, if you accept the coterie of progressivism, you can't do it a la carte. You got to accept the prefix. And so when people see a biological male who identifies as a woman, that's their right to do it. But nuanced conversation says, well, is it fair for a boy that's 6'2" who happens to identify with a girl? Is it fair for that boy to compete against girls? And in many states, families are protesting this stuff. And these very girls are being called, and it's so absurd. I was in a class one day with a really insane progressive professor. I walked away from this program because I think it's garbage. And that's what happens when you have an academic program that's overrun with progressive ideas, no critical thinking. It's just trash, okay? But when this issue came up in class one day about young women and their parents who are raising sand about losing scholarship opportunities and being placed in a position where they have to compete against boys. And this professor said, much to my chagrin, and really, I greatly pitied her. She was a young white woman, and I could tell that she didn't have an ounce of common sense, okay? Her response to the concern of the young girls and their families is that privileged people always have a problem giving up privilege. Now, I want you to think about that, because if you have a daughter that plays soccer or basketball or baseball, the mere fact that they want to compete against each other is not about privilege. It's about common sense. And any jackass professor that has bought into a notion that there are 50,000 genders is impractical. And you can do that stuff in the academy, but guess what? It'll never work with the American voters. And it took Americans some time to see this is what Democrats are about, but I guarantee you this stuff will not play in Peoria. And it didn't even play in New Jersey. Trump lost New Jersey by 5 points. It doesn't play in New York State. Trump lost New York State by 11 percentage points. And it's really not about Trump. That's the tragedy. That, I heard Eddie Glaude said all these terrible things that Trump did. And people have eyes. People have ears. They know the things Trump has said. They know the things Trump has done. But guess what? What Democrats and what the eggheads and the journalists are not willing to admit is that even though Trump has done all of these things, the American people said, well, politics is a choice. It's a binary choice. We got two people running for office, two parties, two governing philosophies. I may not like this guy's manner, but I think he will hold the line on some of these issues that are important to me. And so what the Democrats need to be understanding is that the Democrats have become so extreme. They have become so rigid. They have become so doctrinaire. There's so little nuance in discussing these issues among Democrats that people are simply saying, well, even if I have to put up with Trump, I'm not voting this party in anymore to further these policies. Let me go on for a second. The issue of abortion. Now, there was such a hue and cry when Donald Trump, which Donald Trump didn't actually do, the Republicans had been trying for almost 40 years, since Robert Bork, to control the Supreme Court. Okay, when Bork was borked, Mitch McConnell and other Republicans committed to getting a more conservative Supreme Court. And yes, there are many Republicans that have wanted to overthrow Roe v. Wade. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that it was bad case law. And again, I have such a problem with the histrionics and the hyperbole and the yellow journalism of the journalists and many of the Democratic leaders that just, really brainwash and goad the American people into stress and anxiety. That's why you can't sit up and watch MSNBC. You're going to have a heart attack. You're going to have a stroke because they're lying to you. They never tell you the truth. It's always an extreme version to manipulate your behavior. In the case of the Supreme Court, overturning Roe, all the Supreme Court said was, hey, the Constitution doesn't mention the right to an abortion. If something is not mentioned in the Constitution, if it's not enumerated in the Constitution, then it can't be a constitutional right. And any law or any issue relating to an American citizen that's not adjudicated at the constitutional level has to be handled at the states. And that's all that Dobbs decision did. And look what happened. It's working out beautifully. In Kansas, recently, even on election day, in Missouri, a conservative state that went with Trump, and there were about 6 others, even in Florida, they came this close to enshrining a woman's right access to abortion. And so just what the Supreme Court said is working out. We can't, this is not an issue, a constitutional issue, it's a state issue. And people in the states are making that decision. Local communities, people of a particular state. There was no reason to panic. There was no reason to feel that, but Democrats manipulate, play on feelings, and as a result, it silences the nuance in our party about an issue like abortion. Okay, I remember when Reverend Jesse Jackson used to say, "I'm pro-choice." He said, "I'm pro-choice." Of course, it was a play on words. He was always pro-life, but he was saying, I'm for those to choose responsibility. I'm for those to choose that if you make a baby, you take care of it. Now, of course, America's changed a lot since 70s and 80s when he said that. And of course, the conversation about abortion in the Democratic Party has advanced to a conversation about a woman's right to choose and health care, a woman's right to access to privacy and health care. And all these folks, echoing the same line. Even ministers, I've heard ministers, my good friend Raphael Warnock down there in Georgia, presenting this issue as though it's exclusively about a woman's health. No nuance. It is about a woman's health, principally, but it's also about an unborn life. And there has to be room in the Democratic Party for us to say, don't just present it to young women as an issue about their health, their rights, because when you do that, you'll see what you see happening around the country. I've seen rallies, I've seen protesters, young women who are blessed with a womb to be able to do what no man can do, and that's nurture life and produce life. I've seen them celebrating and clapping and saying things like, "I'll rip that sucker out," because in the Democratic Party, there's no nuance on this issue. It's presented as an oppressive issue. It's presented as an issue exclusively dealing with a woman's autonomy, body autonomy, and that doesn't tell the whole story. Fact remains, the Democratic Party has to get back to a sensible standard. And that standard was abortion should be legal. Yes. It should be rare. Yes. And it should be safe. And most people I know, including Trump and most reasonable Republicans, recognize the 3 exceptions. Hey, rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And then there has to be some cutoff point, some reasonable guidelines on that. Otherwise, you're practicing infanticide, and you can't have that. But again, the Democrats lost because in our party, there's no room to discuss this. Now, I don't want you to get angry with me, but you see, if the Democrats truly are a Big Tent, then they have to accept Democrats like me, Democrats like you, Democrats that think like we think, okay? And at least engage in the conversation. What's wrong with people encouraging young women that are pregnant to consider an abortion? To consider rather adoption. What's wrong with that? Why does that make women lose power? Why is that offensive to the extreme feminists in the progressive movement that see that as not even on the table, and which the Democrats don't even discuss that. And if you do, you're considered anti-woman. That is why the Democrats lost. And I will tell you, my friends, as I move to my conclusion this evening, we've got to do some real introspection. We got to get out of the silos, turn off MSNBC, or if you watch it, stay a few minutes on MSNBC, stay a few minutes on CNN, then go to Fox, read the Wall Street Journal. If you're going to read the New York Times, read the Post. If you're going to read the Daily News, if you're stuck in the Atlantic, also pick up the New Republic. If you're going to listen to Jesse Jackson, listen to Thomas Sowell. You got to have different perspectives. You got to be able to bring a coterie of information into your analysis. And when we do that as a people, and we engage our party. You see, I've always been a Democrat. I'm not leaving the Democratic Party because of somebody like AOC. If I leave, I decide to leave on my own, but she doesn't determine. I was in the Democratic Party before she could even vote. I was in the Democratic Party before many of these progressives even thought about politics, okay? I'm 60 years old. And so they don't get to run the party. They don't get to silence people like me if they want to win. Now, if they want to become an ideological party that silences people that don't agree with them, that's fine with me. I can become a registered independent and I can become a registered Republican if I choose to, because you're not going to intimidate me. I don't think there's anything wrong with Black people being in the Republican Party. In fact, I've been advocating for 20 years that we have a 70-30 plan where 70% of us, fine, just stay in the Democratic Party. We've made tremendous progress in local cities, towns, state, etc. But in terms of that federal election, and in terms of local communities, stay in that Republican Party so that when we lose as Democrats, there'll be some folks on the Republican side representing our interests. The reason why people often say the Republicans don't care about us, and I believe it's because when they have their meetings, we're never in the room, okay? If you're not in the room, how can you ever be considered? You know, let's think about it. We talked about what the Democrats did wrong. I want to leave you on what I think Trump did right. First thing is Trump is plain speaking, okay? And I'm going to tell you something, Eddie Glaude, and I'm going to tell other people. What you don't understand is that it is refreshing to people to see a guy that's plain speaking. Now, if you notice, Trump is essentially rejected by a lot of people in the political class. Not everybody. Clearly, a lot of people in the political class like him. But there are a lot of Republicans that don't like him. George Conway, the husband of Kellyanne Conway, the people at the Lincoln Project, people they call never Trumpers, and of course, the Cheneys and the Bushes. And they don't like Trump. And of course, the Obamas don't like Trump. And the media is astounded that people would vote for Trump. But what people like is that Trump says what he means and means what he says, or at least that's the way he presents himself. They are tired of slick politicians that are eloquent, that smoke reefer but didn't inhale, that have never done anything wrong in life. Eddie Glaude went on and on about the transgressions of Trump. Well, let me tell you something. Every president of the United States has had transgressions. Thomas Jefferson was a slaveholder and statutorily raped Sally Hemings. John F. Kennedy knocked off every woman that came within his sight. Lyndon Johnson, according to great historians, raped secretaries and did all kinds of things. We know that other presidents, George Bush, Dick Cheney, and they brought Brother Colin Powell in. They lied to the American people and said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and millions of people died as a result of that. Obama, how many people died under his administration? So don't sit up here and act like any president that we've ever had is so virtuous and their feet don't touch the ground. Stop the conflating. No president is Jesus. These are men, and these men have done a lot of good, but they've also done a lot of bad. And stop talking about this recent Supreme Court case. Trump now has unchecked power. Presidents have always had unchecked power. When you send men to die, that's unchecked power. When you declare a military action and you don't go before Congress and get approval, that's unchecked power. And so we need to stop. The Democrats need to stop the hypocrisy, stop the whining, stop all of that, because the American people are tired of it. They're not convinced, they're not convicted, and they're not on your side. The character of the Democratic Party can be seen on these network shows. There's a bunch of well-educated elites that are used to having their way. And they will cry, they will complain, they will moan, and they will groan until things go their way. And that's why they hate Donald Trump, because Trump confounds them. And let me tell you something. Whatever you think about Trump, he's resilient. Whatever you think about him. The man has been prosecuted, and the American people did not like that. I don't know who gave our Black prosecutors the idea that you can prosecute this man. First of all, the American people saw these prosecutions as political. Secondly, the American people saw these prosecutions as persecution. Thirdly, the fact that he survived all of these prosecutions has made him more resilient. He survived 2 assassination attempts, and the people know that every media outlet in this country, including Fox, mind you, who is very objective with where Trump is concerned. They have a lot of people on who don't like Trump. So people know this, and the people decided that, you know what, this guy's a bit of an underdog, so I'm going to go with him. And so lawfare hasn't worked. The media coming against him hasn't worked. And so the American people have voted, and he will have another 4-year term. And I will say that to Black folks, let not your heart be troubled. We'll be okay. We have always survived. But here's what I want to leave you with. Rather than just sitting around angry or bewildered, why not engage the new administration? Why not see where we can find common ground with the president? Our mayors, Raz Baraka in Newark, Eric Adams in New York, and mayors all across the country. I hope they will talk with him. I hope they will show that the president will work with you. We need things for our people, and you're in office now. And so we have to deal with you. That's politically smart. It's biblically consistent. Joseph had to establish his value to Pharaoh, and he did. Joseph didn't sit in the corner with rocks in his jaws and say, Pharaoh's got a problem. I'm not going to help him because he's a Republican. Joseph got into that White House and established value to that president. And before you know it, Joseph had solved that president's problem and had become master of the grain house. This is what preachers need to be teaching. This is what Dr. King did. This is what Black ministers have historically done. But Black ministers today have become so much a part of the Democratic coalition. NAACP has become so partisan that they think more for the Democrats, more about outcomes for the Democratic Party than they do for Black people. And that's wrong. And so I hope we'll make some great changes. I hope we'll grow. I hope we will engage this president. I hope we'll stop saying that he won because of racism and misogyny. I hope we'll stop looking out, you intellectuals and you journalists and you folks in California, and New York City, and Boston, and all of these elite areas. Stop talking about the American people and denigrating them in such a disrespectful and irreverent way. Respect the common folk wisdom of the people, because when you look at the map from coast to coast, just huge swaths of red. We used to say it's just the people in the South. Well, let me tell you, the people in the South have made more progress in terms of Black folks than people in the North. But often the people in the South are following the people in the North instead of realizing that they've made more advancements than the people in the northern cities. But it wasn't just the South that voted for Trump. Ohio's not in the South. Indiana's not in the South. Wisconsin's not in the South. Michigan's not in the South. New York, again, only 11 points shy of giving him the victory. New Jersey, Passaic County, where, of course, the great city of Patterson is. It's not in the South. Democrats, you need to understand, we need to understand that this was a resounding rejection, not of Kamala Harris, but of the position, the posture, the ideals, the direction, and the position of the Democratic Party, which has gotten away from the everyday folks. They're more concerned about Oprah, more concerned about Whoopi, more concerned about Hollywood celebrities, Lady Gaga, Snoop Dogg, all these different people who may have come from humble beginnings, but their lives now don't reflect the concerns of the people every day. And so I urge you, open up your tent. You may not want to hear this postmortem. You may get angry at me for saying some of these things. But if you're smart, you'd listen. It's interesting. I'm asked by people all over the country for my advice on the African American community. As I established my bona fides earlier, I have had a thorough life of engaging the Black community. And yet, Democrats never asked my view, not at the local level or the national level. Well, Mayor Adams does, but many don't, and it's very interesting. But I tell you what, you need people like me to give you a perspective, to help you to do some critical analysis, to push back when everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid and they decide to go with some of the positions that they go with. And it's only that way that the Democratic Party can even hope to regain the confidence of the working class, of the middle class, of Latinos, that 45% who voted for Trump, Blacks, 20%. And let me tell you something. When the stigma is removed from the Black community, when people like bullies like Roland Martin and others are silenced, and I'm telling you, if I have anything to do with it, I'm going to continue to call these people out because they don't respect Black people. They think Black people are stupid. And I'm going to continue to call out the Democrats who will not have intelligent conversations with Black people, but think they can threaten, frighten, and cause Black people to continue to support them because of histrionics and hyperbole. And that's just wrong. And so, my friends, I thank you for listening this evening. I hope you will strongly consider the prescription that I have given. I hope you will weigh before you react emotionally. I hope you will weigh some of the things I said and ask yourself, how valuable would this voice had been at some of these tables to help us come to a consensus that would probably speak better to the great mass of American people than our ideas have had. And so thank you for listening. Have a good evening. Sisters, Black women, my own daughter, lift up your head and don't let people for their own purpose make you to see how half empty the glass is. No, don't do that. See how much progress Kamala Harris made toward becoming the first president. And just as I had to swallow the very bitter loss of Reverend Jackson in 1984, but I joined and celebrated with the African American community and the entire country in 2008 when Barack Obama was eventually elected. That day is coming when a candidate will be elected president. She might be a Black conservative woman. And I hope you will value her just as much as you would have valued Kamala Harris. Because we got to understand, Black people are not a monolith. What Black people consistently say or do against people like Ben Carson and Clarence Thomas is a disgrace. It's a left-wing trick that's been played upon you to denigrate any Black conservative rather than see the achievement as an achievement for the race and to achievement to show young Black people that of what they can accomplish. And so lift up your head. She did great. She did excellent. She just didn't get over the hump this time. But don't take all the blame. Place the blame where it really belongs. And then you can see some hope and some optimism instead of being filled with despair. Dry your tears. Everything's going to be all right. Until Tuesday, thank you so much for listening. Please like, please share, and study, analyze what I've said this evening. I guarantee you, if you wrestle with it, you'll find a lot in it. Thank you so much.